My name is Dale. I repair vintage radios for a living. It's quiet, patient work, and I prefer it that way. Most people have no idea what goes into it, and I'm perfectly happy keeping it that way. I also own 11 wooded acres on the ridge above Comstock Falls. The land is steep, isolated, and entirely mine. I paid for every acre in cash after saving through more than 2 decades of contract jobs that hardly anyone ever bothered to ask about. 3 weeks ago, an HOA contractor drove a flatbed truck straight through my front gate. He ignored 2 separate signs that clearly warned against trespassing. He passed another that read, "Private road, steep grade, no outlet." The only sign he never got around to reading was the last one. His truck is still sitting up there today, buried axle deep in mud with its front end hanging toward a steep drop. The HOA wants their truck back. They're just going to need my permission first. The funny part is they don't even realize that yet. It all started with something simple, a letter in my mailbox. It came in a cream-colored envelope with an embossed seal, the kind designed to make you feel like whatever was inside carried authority before you even opened it. Inside was a violation notice from the Comstock Falls HOA citing code 14B, unsightly vegetation encroachment. Apparently, my trees were offending someone. There was just one problem. I wasn't part of the HOA. I never had been. My property had been grandfathered out long before the subdivision was ever built. Even so, I called the number listed on the notice, figuring I'd handle it politely before it turned into something unnecessary. A man named Russ Kowalik answered. He introduced himself as the HOA's compliance director, saying the title with all the confidence of someone announcing a military rank. "Mr. Dale," he said, "your property borders our community. We expect voluntary compliance." I explained that my land wasn't under his association's authority. He chuckled as though I'd told him a joke. That was strike 1. 2 weeks later came strike 2. Another letter arrived, this one thicker than the first. This time, it included fines, $200 every week, increasing steadily because I still hadn't trimmed trees located on property the HOA didn't own. Attached was a photograph of my front gate. The picture had been taken from inside my property line. That meant someone had already walked onto my land without permission. I didn't bother calling this time. Instead, I checked the trail camera mounted near the entrance. I kept it there out of routine more than concern. Sure enough, there was Russ Kowalik. Clipboard tucked under one arm, he strolled up my driveway like the place belonged to him. Behind him sat an HOA SUV, white with a green stripe, parked carelessly across my gravel drive. That clipboard became unforgettable. I'd be seeing it a lot more. Strike 3 arrived on a Saturday morning. I was up near the house when I heard an engine struggling below. Low gears, spinning tires, mud flying everywhere. When I walked outside, Russ was standing beside his SUV at the bottom of my driveway. Behind him, a flatbed truck driven by a contractor wearing an HOA polo shirt was forcing its way up the switchback leading toward my property. My gate stood wide open. I never leave that gate open. I headed down the hill. Russ spotted me without the slightest hesitation. He raised his clipboard as if it were an official badge. "We have a court order," he declared. "No, you don't," I answered. "We have the right to inspect for compliance." "You have a truck that's about to drive off my mountain." He ignored every word. Instead, he waved the driver forward. The truck crawled past the switchback, rolled beyond the warning sign about the steep grade and dead end, and continued onto an old logging spur I had never finished because it ends at a 40-foot ravine. The truck made it maybe 80 yards. Then the rear tires slipped onto the soft shoulder. The ground gave way. The entire flatbed dropped until the axles disappeared into the mud, leaning dangerously toward the edge, while the engine roared and sprayed dirt in every direction. Russ simply stood there, gripping his clipboard, staring at his contractor's truck stranded on my property. Then he said something I'll never forget. "This is a private matter now. We'll be filing a claim." A claim against me. For a truck that had gotten stuck while trespassing across my land, after ignoring 3 warning signs and 1 direct verbal warning I had given standing right there on my own gravel driveway. That was strike 4. Every bit of the damage had been caused by his own contractor refusing to listen. I called the county sheriff's non-emergency line. I explained that a vehicle had trespassed onto private property and become immobilized. I also told them I had trail camera footage, timestamps, and everything needed to document. His expression shifted just enough to notice, like a man suddenly realizing the ground beneath his confidence wasn't any firmer than the mud swallowing his contractor's truck. "You're not a lawyer," he said, as though that settled the entire argument. "I never claimed to be," I replied. "I don't have to be. I just have to read the trespass statute out loud." So I did, word for word. Then I cited the case law covering the penalties involved. The fines he'd been sending me had no legal standing because they were issued against property that wasn't part of the HOA. Once you step outside the association's recorded boundaries, those so-called violation notices stop being enforcement and start looking a whole lot like fraudulent solicitation. The deputy stopped taking notes about my trees. Instead, he started writing down things that had Russ's name attached to them. That was strike 5. It didn't take long after that. I filed a formal complaint with the county. I included everything. The trail camera footage documented 3 separate trespassing incidents, each one time-stamped, each one showing Russ Kowalik clearly walking across my property with that same clipboard tucked under his arm. I attached copies of every fraudulent violation notice. I also included the photograph he'd taken from inside my property line, which by itself was evidence of another act of trespassing. The county reviewed the file and forwarded it to the state licensing board. That's when another surprise surfaced. Russ's title of compliance director wasn't official at all. He had given it to himself. The HOA's governing documents didn't even include such a position. He'd simply created the title 2 years earlier, and somehow nobody on the board had ever questioned it. That discovery cracked everything wide open. Once the board realized the title was fake, they naturally started asking what else wasn't legitimate. It turned out the escalating fine program hadn't been approved by the board either. Russ had been operating it on his own. Every so-called voluntary compliance payment homeowners mailed in earned him a percentage. And I wasn't the only target. He'd been collecting money from actual HOA members using the same unauthorized system. Not long afterward, the board president, Carol Hensley, called me herself. She apologized personally. She insisted she had no idea any of this had been happening. After hearing her voice and seeing the financial records she referenced, I believed her. She sounded genuinely sick over what she'd discovered. She wasn't the only person whose story started falling apart. The towing company Russ hired to recover the stranded truck made 3 unsuccessful attempts. During the last one, an expensive winch cable snapped clean in half. Eventually, someone from the company admitted on the record that Russ had told them the property was HOA common area and instructed them to ignore every warning sign they saw. That statement became part of the official file, too. The truck remained stranded on my mountain for 11 days before the HOA finally hired a specialized recovery crew capable of removing it safely. They paid every dollar of the bill. I watched the whole operation from my porch with a mug of coffee in my hands. I didn't celebrate. There wasn't any reason to. The ending speaks for itself without exaggeration. Within a week of the board meeting, Russ Kowalik was removed from every HOA position, paid or unpaid. The state opened an investigation into the fraudulent fine collection program. Homeowners who had mailed in those so-called voluntary compliance payments began receiving refund notices. The towing company also lost its county contract after investigators confirmed the false statements about the property. As for the HOA, the new leadership mailed me a written apology, along with a formal acknowledgement that my 11 acres were completely outside the association's jurisdiction. The document was notarized and officially recorded with the county. I never demanded any of it. All I ever wanted was for people to leave my gate alone and stop trying to control trees that weren't theirs. Some evenings, I still walk down to that old logging spur where the flatbed sat for those 11 days. The deep ruts are slowly disappearing now. Grass is working its way back through the tire tracks, little by little, reclaiming the ground. When I stand there, I don't feel victorious. Mostly I feel tired. Maybe a little disappointed that it took so much trouble before anyone bothered to read a few simple signs. Last month, I added one more sign near the entrance. It's small. Easy to overlook if you're not paying attention. It simply says, "I read my own land surveys." No one has asked me what it means yet. Part of me hopes someone eventually will. So I'll leave you with this question. How many voluntary compliance letters have you received from people who never stop?